Since Uncle Roger, who is an expert food critic, has strongly recommended MSG, I tried to order some online. So I found a website selling fresh eggs, and I searched for 1700 package of MSG for my mom, and this is the result I found. So I click on one of them. It looks slightly different from the white powder I was expecting, but I guess it's just the packaging. So I added to the cart. I also added some related items. It cost around $1,800, a bit more than I expected. It's also something not eatable because it's a computer, so I guess I'm building a new computer now. The motherboard is the MSG Z690 Tomahawk DDR4. It has the LGA 1700 chipset, which supports the latest Intel 12th generation Alder CPU. Power supply is the Seasonic Focus 850 watt Platinum full modular. It has an active mode and a passive mode. In the active mode, the fan is always on. In the passive mode, the fan is off most of the time and only turn on when your computer is on fire. I can't tell between the two modes because the thing is super quiet. As for the CPU, I got the latest Intel i9-12900k Alder Lake. It has 8 big performance core and 8 little efficient core. Unlike the 11th generation Intel CPU, the i9 and i7 has exactly same 8 cores. The latest generation i9 has 4 more efficient cores than the i7. The price difference is only $200, which means it's only $50 per core. I think it's a really good deal. Not to mention that the i9 also got a larger L3 cache and L2 cache than the i7. The i9 also used slightly more power, which is not as bad as most people think. For storage, I use the Samsung 980 Pro M.2 SSD 2TB. It's slightly faster than the floppy disk I have been using in the past. It supports PCI Express 4.0 with read-write speed of 7200. I got 6900 in benchmark, which is quite close to the advertised speed. Most of the cheaper SSD is using QLC, and this one is using TLC, which make it faster and more reliable. For the RAM, I got the G.Skill Ripjaws 5 32GB 3600 DDR4. Why I picked DDR4 instead of DDR5? DDR5 is a myth. It's like the leprechaun. Lots of people talk about it, but no one have seen it in real life. DDR5, if they do exist, is for rich people like Elon Musk. If you are a poor peasant like me, I strongly recommend you to go with DDR4. You don't lose much in performance anyway. For the CPU cooler, I picked the Noctua D15S. It set me back another $100. Is it worth the money? I don't know. But it's the size of a small nuclear reactor, so it must be good stuff. It doesn't come with the LGA 1700 mount originally, but Noctua sent me one free from Frankfurt. If you buy the cooler now, it should include the mount already. As for graphics cards, this is my graphics card. It may not fit into the PCI Express slot, and I may need to take it to the outside of my case. It doesn't have a fan, so it won't fail, and it's totally green and costs no electricity. I'm just kidding. I'm not that rich. I'll be reusing my old 1070 graphics card. Unless I win the lottery or Bitcoin goes bankrupt, this will be my graphics card for the next 10 years. You may notice I didn't include a case in my shopping cart. That's because I'm going to reuse my old case. Her name is Rebecca. She's Retro Design R5. She's a bit unhappy now because I'm going to replace her inside with something else. I guess anyone will be unhappy if someone is going to replace your organs with something else. I pre-ordered all my parts at the beginning of November. My delivery guy couldn't deliver my CPU to me because of a bit of rain, flooding, and mudslide, and it only took me 30 days to receive everything. After I gather everything, I start to build my computer. While I'm doing that, I would like to talk about why I picked the MSG Z690 Tomahawk motherboard. I've always used Asus motherboard in the past. I've considered Asus Prime Z690 and Tough Gaming, and also Asus ROG Z690A. Why did I switch brand this time? Here are my reasons. For the Prime Z690 Tough Gaming, they only have 4 SATA boards. I have 6 hard drives for all my vintage points collection, so it's definitely not enough. They also don't have enough USB ports at the back and inside. As for the Asus ROG Strix Z690A, Tomahawk has one more PCI Express 3.0 port. You can add anything else, but you can't add PCI Express slot because you need PCI Express slot to add anything else. And PCI Express slot for the Tomahawk is also in better location, not covered by the graphics card like in the Asus motherboard. You also have an optical SPDIF output, not that I need it. It's also $70 cheaper. Cheaper is always good. For the Asus motherboard, the cooler doesn't fit very well. Their VRAM heatsinks are overkill and block the clearance for the CPU cooler. You need to install the CPU cooler 90 degrees to fit on the motherboard. On the Asus board, the M.2 also share the same bus as the SATA board. It means if you have a M.2 SATA, you won't be able to use some of the SATA port on the Asus motherboard. Well, I used to consider this a major disadvantage for the Asus, but I checked the price for the M.2 SATA drive. This is really a non-issue. This only applies for the M.2 SATA drive, which is much slower and not much cheaper than the regular M.2 drives. There's no reason for anyone to buy one unless you already own one. Asus motherboard does have some minor advantage. It has slightly better audio, AI noise cancellation, probably non-noticeable. It has 4 USB 3.2 Gen 1 instead of 2 for the MSI, but the total number of USB ports are the same. For me, most of my stuff is using the old USB 2. I don't really have a lot of USB 3 device. The Asus motherboard also have a clear CMOS button. For the MSI, I have to use a reset button from my old computer as the clear CMOS button. A bit inconvenient. The ROG has memory test included in the BIOS. It's always convenient to have it built in, but putting from USB is not a big issue for me. The last and most important one, the MSG Tomahawk motherboard doesn't catch fire like the Asus Hero Z690. I don't know about you, but I prefer my motherboard not catching fire. You know, with all the fan noise and people screaming. This only applies to the Asus Hero Z690, which is a DDR4 motherboard. Some of the early version of the motherboard has a faulty component that may catch fire. It's a bit inconvenient, even in cold winter of Canada. After building my computer, it posts right away. It works right out of the box. The MSI BIOS is much more stable than the Gigabyte motherboards, which you need to update before you can even install Windows 11. The only issue I found is the XMP profile doesn't work for the 3600 RAM. I installed my RAM to the 2nd and 4th slots, so pretty sure it's correct. I have to overclock the RAM manually. I can overclock all the way to 3200 but not higher because I can't change the DRAM voltage. Whatever I set it to is always 1.2 volt. But 3200 is really not too much different from 3600. I probably won't spend too much time trying to fix it. So this is Amanda, my new computer. She's also unhappy. That's because she doesn't have DDR5 and she only has an old shitty graphics card, and she's also ugly. Well, she may be ugly, but she's much faster than my old computer Rebecca. Rebecca was a 4790K, a 4th generation Intel Haswell. Rebecca wasn't too slow, even though it's 8th generation behind. But Amanda here is really fast, not just because of the CPU upgrade, but also because of the M.2 upgrade. Amanda also doesn't eat too much. The Intel 12900k only consumes around 16 watts of power under light load. My whole system, including the motherboard, CPU, 1070 graphics card, and 6 hard drives, only consume around 145 watts under light load, which is slightly less than my old computer Rebecca. When gaming, Amanda consumes around 245 watts. Temperature is around 40 to 50 degrees when browsing. Playing Total War 2 in 4K resolution with high setting, I got 36 frames per second, which is still playable. This is exactly the same as my old computer. I'm not surprised because my bottleneck is in GPU, not CPU. When playing Red Dead Redemption 2 in high settings, with 2K resolution, I get about 40 frames per second, which is also exactly the same as before. For Wasteland 3, I also get 40 frames per second, but this time it is in 4K resolution. It is quite playable even with my 1070 graphics card. If play game is the same, why pick the i9 and not i5 or even i3? It's because my job involves a lot of complicated programming. Most of the time, it's short bursts of high CPU usage. The Intel 12900k usually saves me a few seconds of compiling time. It might not seem much, but multiply that by 1,000 is still not that much. But if it's not the time you save, it is the stress you avoided and hair you lose. When you see your screen freeze for a few seconds, you get stressful and sometimes you get a heart attack. So avoiding that few seconds of freezing will be beneficial to my health. It also helps in photo editing and video editing, like what I'm doing right now. In conclusion, for my setup, I can play games in 4K or 2K resolution, around 40 frames per second. It's exactly the same as my old computer. But for programming, I can do it much faster, same as photo editing and video editing. For CPU temperature, it's from 40 degree to 85 degree, and most of the time it's 40 degree, and when idle it's about 30 degree. For power consumption, it's from 30 watt to 220 watt, and most of the time it's 30 watt. For the power consumption for the whole system is 150 watt to 340 watt, and most of the time is 150 watt. So this is my financial goal for 2022. First, I get the computer, then I get the food, then I get the home, and I maybe get a DDR5, and then last I would get the graphics card. Currently, I am at step 1, which is the computer right now, and hopefully I will get the rest later. Thank you for watching.